Okay, so it's good to see everybody today. Just a note that next Monday I have to take off. We won't have the journey class next Monday because I'll be in New York helping my daughter move into a new apartment. So all good. And we'll meet again after today on May 10th, and we'll talk about Shavuot then, because then we'll be off the following week for Shavuot. So it's kind of an abrupt schedule like that, and I apologize for that, but I appreciate you sticking with it. So today I want to talk about two things related to the calendar, two events that are on the Jewish calendar this week, one that's today and one that's coming up on Friday. Today is known as Pesach Sheini, which is second Passover. That's what it literally means. And reminds us there's nothing that we do well, I'll get into that in a second, what we do about Pesach Sheini today. But it harks back to the Torah when in the book of Numbers, in the portion Baha'alotecha, around chapter 9, chapter 10 of the book of Numbers, we're told that the holiday of Passover happened in the second year. Most of the book of Numbers, most of the beginning book of Numbers happens in the second year after the Israelites were out of Egypt, and describes that Passover came along. And a few people approach Moses and say, hey, we're impure. According to the laws that you taught us, we're not able to celebrate Passover because it can only be celebrated by people in purity. People who are pure are the only ones allowed to bring the Passover sacrifice. What about us? We want to be able to celebrate Passover. And then one of the few times, there are a few times in the Torah where Moses is stumped. He doesn't give the answer on the spot to the people about what they can do, how they can celebrate Passover. So he approaches God and said, what do I tell these people? And God says, okay, there's an opportunity next month. So 1 month after Passover, exactly 1 month after Passover. So remember, the Passover sacrifice, when the temple was standing and before, was offered on the 14th of Nisan. And then that evening at nightfall, at sunset, the holiday of Passover began. So 14th leading into the 15th of Nisan is Passover. So 1 month later, the 14th of Iyar, which is today, would be an opportunity for those to make up for missing out on first Passover for two reasons, either if because of purity reasons, or if one was too far away to make it to the Mishkan or to the temple in time. So if one is on business, let's say one is a traveling caravan salesman, which is common, it was common in the time of the Bible. There were caravans that passed through because Israel itself was on a major trade route connecting Africa to Asia. So there were a lot, and also a port city because of the Mediterranean. So many people were traveling through. So it could be that for business reasons, if you're too far away, you could offer the Passover sacrifice on the 14th of Iyar, again, 1 month after, or if you were impure on the 14th of Nisan, you could be sure to be pure on the 14th of Iyar and be able to offer the Passover sacrifice then. Pesach Sheini then really was a holiday to be observed only when the temple was standing in Jerusalem. So because The purity issues are no longer issues for us today. Everyone is in a state of impurity, and we don't have to, since we're not offering the Passover sacrifice anymore, because we can't offer any sacrifices since the temple was destroyed. So Passover then is not, we don't rely on the Passover sacrifice in order to observe Passover today. So the reason of impurity is no longer a reason. So therefore, we don't have to worry about missing out on first Passover because of that. And also the travel reason is not a sufficient reason today for people to say that they can't observe Passover. In other words, the travel meaning you couldn't make it to Jerusalem to offer the Passover sacrifice. Today, since we're not offering a sacrifice, you can observe Passover wherever you are. And every year around pre-COVID time on RavNet, the listserv for conservative rabbis, rabbis would be asking, I have a congregant who's going to be in Spain for Passover. Anybody know of a Seder there? Or they're in some godforsaken place around the world, and invariably there's an answer. Yes, here's a contact person for to arrange for a Seder. And if there's not a conservative rabbi there, there's Chabad all around the world, even in Nepal, in the far reaches of South America, pre-COVID. There were, you could find a Seder almost anywhere around the world. So travel is not an impediment for observing Passover on time today either. So Pesach Sheini is still on the calendar, right? So if for those of you who use a computer calendar like I do, you go to hebcal.com and you can download a calendar from there that you can integrate into your Google Calendar, which I do, so that I have the Hebrew dates on every date of my calendar. I have the portion of the week. I have candle lighting times, Havdalah time. I have the day of the Omer and all other Jewish holidays. So today says Pesach Sheini on my calendar. Now, I didn't check my calendar from the Jewish funeral home, from Torchinsky Hebrew Funeral Home. If it says Pesach Sheini there too, I would bet that it does. So what does Pesach Sheini mean today for our Jewish calendar? So all it means is there is one prayer that in our congregation we never do anyway, but in traditional congregations, there's a prayer to recite, which is a couple pages long, after the Amidah in the morning, and it's also in the afternoon service. So after the Amidah in the morning and the afternoon service, before we continue with Chatzi Kaddish, there's a prayer called Tachanun, which are private. It's always done silently and only concluded out loud by the person leading the service. They are private prayers of supplication in which it's traditional, wherever you're sitting, to put your arm over against your forehead and kind of lean forward as a sign of, I don't want to call it agony, but sorrow. You're expressing in these prayers sorrow for our actions that together with other individuals for the entire community led us to being in exile. And we look forward to God redeeming us from exile. That's essentially what Tachanun is about. Most conservative synagogues no longer recite Tachanun, mainly because conservative Judaism, as other denominations of Judaism, are strongly Zionist in ideology. And with the establishment of the State of Israel, we're not really in mourning and considering ourselves being in exile anymore. So to recite Tachanun, it seems kind of weird when we should be celebrating that the State of Israel exists. So our congregation, since I've been here and even before, does not recite Tachanun. So there are times that, so those private prayers of supplication are not recited on days in which there is joy. So Pesach Sheini, as a day in which it is joyful, because if the temple were standing in Jerusalem and we were impure or far away, it would be an opportunity to celebrate the Passover holiday 1 month late. So if we're celebrating, then you don't do Tachanun. So, so for those traditionalists who would be reciting Tachanun, if you, our prayer book, the Sim Shalom prayer book, has Tachanun in it, because there are some traditional conservative synagogues that still recite Tachanun. So if you look there for Tachanun, which would be for the morning service, it's I'm just looking, just 1 second. 59. So if you look on page 59, in the weekday Sim Shalom, there is, so there's a long list, which they don't list on page 59. It says on page 44, yes, below the line on the English, all those days that Tachanun is not recited. So there are a lot of days throughout the calendar which are joyful, and because they're joyful, you don't recite Tachanun. So for all of these days, so Pesach Sheini is another one of those days that we don't recite Tachanun. And there are some. I just by chance looked up Pesach Sheini online. So there's a Wikipedia article about Pesach Sheini. Apparently there's a custom among some, I've never seen this, of eating matzah today. Just as a reminder that today's Pesach Sheini. So I don't know if that's something that you'd want to do, pull out a box of matzah that you kept from Passover. And thanks, Barbara. You checked the calendar. It lists Pesach Sheini. I kind of thought it would. Yes, you got the Torchinsky Hebrew Funeral Home calendar right there. So if you had some matzah left over from Passover, you could eat matzah today. You wouldn't have to clean your house to get rid of chametz today. And there aren't 6 or 7 more days of a holiday to observe from today on. It's just this one opportunity to give a second chance, if the temple were standing, to bring the Passover sacrifice. That's all. Because everything else about Passover, anybody could have done the first time. If you're impure, you could still refrain from eating chametz and eat kosher or Passover food. You could still do the other things, go to shul, etc. So, see, there you go. My father said that the person at Minyan brought a box of matzah today. Now, that could have been out of just because it's funny, but really, some actually do have the custom of eating matzah today, not just showing it off because it's Pesach Sheini, ha ha ha, but really eating matzah throughout the day. So that's Pesach Sheini. Just so again, to understand what that means, now you'll know what it means when you see it on your Jewish calendar in the years to come, that it's based on the Torah. The people who were impure at the first go round asking Moses what to do, and Moses asking God, and God designating this day, which is the 14th of Iyar, as the second Passover. Now, this coming week on Friday is a day called Lag BaOmer, which is a different kind of holiday. There are some days in the calendar that are there for historical reasons, right? We talked about Yom HaShoah, which was on the Jewish calendar is there to remind us of the Warsaw Ghetto uprising. We have Tisha B'Av, the 9th day of Av, to remind us of the destruction of the temple in Jerusalem, that fast day. The 17th of Tammuz, which is the day in which the siege of Jerusalem was broken by both the Romans in 70 CE and the Babylonians 500 years before, when the first temple was destroyed. So the breaking of the siege, so 3 weeks from the 17th of Tammuz to the 9th of Av. Those days are there, and there are other fast days as well to remind us of historical occasions, the fast of Esther, the 10th of Tevet, the 3rd of Tishrei, the fast of Gedalia, all there for historical reasons. The holidays the other holidays, the main holidays that we celebrate, have historical significance to them, but also agricultural significance as well. And the Torah commands us to celebrate those days. The fast days, other than Yom Kippur, no other fast day is in the Torah. These fast days got added onto the calendar later. And Lag BaOmer is one of those later days. Now, why is it called Lag BaOmer? So I wrote down here on my yellow pad all the Hebrew letters of the alphabet. And I don't know if you can see this very well, but I have Aleph through Yud down this column. Aleph, every Hebrew letter of the alphabet has a numerical equivalent based on Jewish tradition. So Aleph through Yud is 1 through 10. Then the next letters, Kaf through Kuf, are the numbers increasing by 10. So it's 20, 30, etc. to 100. So Aleph to Yud is 1 through 10. Kaf through Kuf is 20 through 100. And then the last 3 letters of the alphabet, Resh, Shin, and Taf. It's not Shin and Sin are not 2 different letters. They're the same letter. It's just the dots on a different place on top. So it's Resh, Shin, and Taf, 200, 300, and 400. Okay, so if we're making a number, like if we wanted to make the number 33, we would use the letter Lamed for 30 and the letter Gimel for 3. Hence, Lag BaOmer, 33rd day of the Omer. And the Omer, as we talked about last week, is the 50 days between Passover and Shavuot. Okay, so the 33rd day of Omer, Lag BaOmer, the 33 days in the Omer, is a special day in the calendar. And the special day but historically, it is based on legend, why we observe Lag BaOmer today. We can't prove that the events associated with Lag BaOmer actually happened. So there are 2 things about Lag BaOmer that are integral to how Lag BaOmer is observed today. So the first thing is, one element of Lag BaOmer, what is significant about 33 days into the Omer period, is that there is this tradition that Rabbi Akiva, who's one of the greatest rabbis of the time of the Mishnah, so the Mishnah is the first law code edited by Rabbi Judah Hanassi in around the year 200 CE. So the rabbis who were in Israel from about 100 BCE to 200 CE were studying the Torah and developing the system of Judaism that we observe today. And they developed a system of Jewish law based on the interpretation of the Bible to develop those Jewish laws. They passed those traditions down from one generation to the next orally, because they said that only the Torah should be the only written book that we have. Anything else that we write might dare to have people think that it's just as holy as the Torah. We don't want people to have that impression. We're going to keep this as an oral tradition. But by the time of Judah Hanasi, the Jewish community in Israel had declined in numbers. People had moved by then mostly to Babylonia. Judah Hanasi said, better edit what we have here to keep it for posterity. So the Mishnah, the first Jewish law code, was edited in his time. So Rabbi Akiva, one of the greatest rabbis of the time of the Mishnah, lived about 60 years after the temple was destroyed in the 130s. At that time, there was an emperor, Hadrian, who, so the temple was destroyed in the year 70, was left in rubble. In 135, the Emperor Hadrian decided to clear the Temple Mount and to build a temple to the Roman gods, calling it, I think, Aelia Capitolina, something like that. Not a Latin expert. My father nodded, so I think I pronounced it right. So Aelia Capitolina is what Hadrian called the Temple Mount and Jerusalem at that time. Just as around the year 70, there was a segment of the Jewish community that decided to rise up in armed revolt against the Roman forces, obviously losing, but the zealots rose up in revolt against the Romans then. So too, in the time of Hadrian, there were those who rose up in revolt as well. There was a man by the name of Bar Kosiba, the son of Kosiba, who was then known by tradition as Bar Kokhba, the son of the star, to lead this military revolt. And Rabbi Akiva was one of his most staunchest supporters in protesting and rebelling against the Roman Empire. So there are many rabbis and members of the Jewish community who revolted against the Roman army, the Roman forces at that time, obviously losing, but there were coins that were found, archaeological discoveries all the time, finding coins that were minted in the land of Israel at that time that have imprinted with Bar Kokhba on it. So we know that revolt led by Bar Kokhba was a real thing. And Beitar was like the last stronghold against the Romans at that time. So these things are proven and corroborated by historical sources, archaeological sources. What's not related to the armed revolt against Hadrian in 135, that happened at the time of Rabbi Akiva, who was the main rabbi of the rabbinic Jewish community in Israel at the time. Two traditions are related then to Lag BaOmer. One is that 24,000 students of Rabbi Akiva were dying in a plague from Passover through the Omer period. And the plague miraculously stopped on Lag BaOmer. So this 24,000 students, so that's how you know that that's a legend that will not be corroborated. 24,000 students is an incredible amount. Just think about it today. Are there 24,000 students studying in the Lubavitcher Yeshiva in Crown Heights, Brooklyn? No, but that's a large yeshiva. Are there 25,000 students in Mossad Harav Kook, which is one of the main modern Orthodox rabbinical academies in Jerusalem today, the Rav Kook Academy? No, there aren't 24,000 students there. Bar Ilan University, which is the Orthodox equivalent to Yeshiva University outside of Tel Aviv, does it have 24,000 students today? It might, but it's not. But they're not rabbinical students. That's an undergraduate and graduate degree granting university outside of Tel Aviv. Not I don't think it has a rabbinical school attached to it. The rabbinical students of Rabbi Akiva, 24,000 of them, according to legend, died of a plague. Okay, so I just want to point out that Talmudic stories are to be understood just by that, as stories. They are not to be understood as factual description of historical events. The Talmud, in the course of relating a story, might refer tangentially to a historic event, and that way could be accurate, but in the presenting of a story, it is this, the Talmud doesn't claim to be history and only claims to teach a lesson from the story itself. Why did these 24,000 students of Rabbi Akiva die from a plague? Because they did not respect one another. Okay, is that reason for God to bring a plague to kill them? Okay, we have to look in the Talmud itself to study that story, but 24,000 students of Rabbi Akiva died. So that's Rabbi Akiva. There are other rabbis at that time, and the rabbis are known for having many students studying with them. But 24,000, okay, a bit of an exaggeration. But the plague that afflicted them to kill them because they did not respect one another, that plague ended on Lag BaOmer. Okay, so that's what, and the tradition, there is a tradition during this Omer period of not conducting a wedding ceremony, for rabbis not officiating at a wedding, or for people to get married during the Omer. You are allowed to conduct a wedding, though, on Lag BaOmer. Okay, so the Omer period is known as a slightly mournful period. So there is a tradition in the traditional Jewish community for people not to shave during the first 33 days of the Omer. And again, like I said, not to plan any kind of celebratory event, especially a wedding during this time, but Lag BaOmer would be a time that the day, that would be this coming Thursday night, Friday, that one could celebrate a wedding. Now, Friday for a wedding historically is a common thing to do. In fact, if you just Google ketubah or historical ketubah, you could see beautiful illuminated ketubot from history. Many of them have Yom Shishi as the day to get married. There are 2 days of the week in which God, in the creation of the world, chapter 1 of Genesis, in which God said about that day, it was good, twice. So Tuesday was a good day, a doubly good day, and Friday was a doubly good day. So that because it's a doubly good day, it's a day of good luck and good fortune. So it would be common then to get married on a Monday night, Tuesday, or on a Thursday night, Friday, to get married on a day that is extra lucky. So Lag BaOmer on a Friday would be triply lucky and triply fortuitous. And so that would be a good day to get married. So Lag BaOmer then is associated with that legend of the 24,000 students of Rabbi Akiva. Now, 2 other things here. When I was growing up, going to Jewish day school, Lag BaOmer was a day for relay races, outdoor activities, kind of playing. Also, and I remember this at Kelman Academy. So that's Kelman Academy was the Solomon Schechter Day School in Cherry Hill, New Jersey. I remember getting a bow and arrow, maybe in 1st or 2nd grade. I don't remember, but it wasn't a real bow. It was a kind that, a suction cup at the end of it. So it's kind of a play kind of thing. It was before, so old that it was before Nerf was invented. So they have Nerf bows and arrows now, but this was pre-Nerf, and it had a suction cup at the end of it. So you kind of play with these bows and arrows. What does that have to do with Lag BaOmer, these relay races? Well, it's related to the revolt against the Romans. So that Rabbi Akiva is associated with this plague for his students, but he's also associated with the revolt against the Romans. So it is common then, and this is throughout my day school years. So whether at Kelman Academy or at Akiva Hebrew Academy in Philly, Lag BaOmer was a day that we went on a field trip, went to a park, and just had organized or unorganized games to play and relay races to play, either as a grade or school-wide, something like that. So lots of Jewish day schools will have Lag BaOmer as a day to do that. It's supposed to we're supposed to be reminded of these games, the war games, or real war activity in the time of Akiva against the Romans, but that's how it developed over time today, to kind of play these games, to kind of feel as a Jewish community and a nation, to feel inspired again to fight back or to feel triumphant in some way. So so all of that, the bows and arrows, the war games, the outside activities, and the mournful customs related to Lag BaOmer, that's all of that. Yes, Margie.
Don't Orthodox people get the boys get their first haircuts?
That's the next thing I'm about to talk about, related to this. Now, 24,000 students died, leaving Rabbi Akiva with 5 students left. One of them was Shimon Bar Yochai. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai is known in the Mishnah and the Talmud as one of these great sages who is known for his spiritual, almost prophetic kind of powers. So during this time, right, like I said, Akiva was rebelling against the Roman Empire. So the Roman Empire, we have the martyrology service that's added on Yom Kippur after Yom Kippur morning to the Musaf service, that section in which we remember martyrs of Jewish history. Traditionally, we focus on rabbis in the time of the Mishnah who were tortured to death by the Romans. Okay, Rabbi Akiva was one of those rabbis that we read about. And in fact, the Mishnah, the Talmud talks about it in the first tractate, Brachot, about how Rabbi Akiva was imprisoned, and students are coming to him, trying to still study with him in prison, trying to learn from him. Akiva is then led out on his execution day and tortured really, really horribly. Right? They sent the Romans set up a fire, and Akiva is kind of tied to a post, so he's still alive. It's just awful. But Akiva teaches about the Shema, one line in the Shema, as he's being tortured to death. He's just one of the many rabbis listed in the martyrology service who were tortured to death by the Romans. So because that happened, people had to go in hiding. The Romans proclaimed and decreed that public teaching of Torah was prohibited. So in order to survive as a Jewish people, the rabbis and their students had to go in hiding. So Shimon Bar Yochai and his son hid in a cave. And miraculously, the story goes that for 12 years in hiding in the cave, God provided a spring of a natural freshwater spring in the cave and a carob tree, so that Shimon Bar Yochai and his son were able to eat carobs and drink water every day. And then 12 years later, his wife comes by saying that it's free, you can come out of your cave now. Now you can imagine, so this is a story about Shimon Bar Yochai and his spiritual prowess, when he comes out of the cave, anything he looks up burns to a crisp. He sees people going about their business. He looks at them and they burn to a crisp. God says, get back in the cave. So for 12 more years, he has to stay in the cave to learn how to temper his power, his so I can't help thinking about like the Avengers and the powers that these people have. So you can't put glasses on to keep the eyesight from killing people. But so the point of the story is how great and spiritual a person Shimon Bar Yochai was. The legend about him then is two things about Shimon Bar Yochai related to what you were saying, Margie, about kids getting their haircut on Lag BaOmer. One is Shimon Bar Yochai's yahrzeit is Lag BaOmer. Okay, so we don't know for sure, but Lag BaOmer is that's the date that's ascribed to Shimon Bar Yochai's yahrzeit. And okay, big deal. So you've seen one rabbi's yahrzeit, you've seen them all, but Shimon Bar Yochai is a great rabbi for the ultra-Orthodox Hasidic world, because Shimon Bar Yochai is supposed to have been the author of the Zohar. So the Zohar is the greatest collection of mystical literature in Jewish tradition. So it's a mystical interpretation and commentary to the Torah. And perhaps that's what Shimon Bar Yochai and his son were doing in the cave for 12 years, and then for 12 more years. So through their great spiritual prowess, they're able to understand the Torah in a way that most people can't understand it today. I mean, if you just read the first line of the Zohar, and someone who has some Jewish knowledge and Jewish background is still, you're perplexed, because you can't really understand exactly what's going on. But the Zohar, according to scholars, the Zohar was written in Spain in the 1200s. But the Zohar itself ascribes itself to Shimon Bar Yochai. And so then, because of his great mystical prowess, the author of the greatest Jewish mystical text in our tradition, the Zohar, and because it's his yahrzeit, then the ultra-Orthodox make a pilgrimage on Lag BaOmer to Meron, which is a hilltop in north central Israel, which is supposedly Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai's tomb. So they make the pilgrimage on Lag BaOmer to that. And then since we're not supposed to get our haircut during the Omer, but you could get your haircut on Lag BaOmer, right? You can shave and get your haircut on Lag BaOmer. The tradition is that boys should let their hair grow. Parents let their son's hair grow until their third birthday. And so, which relates to the idea that a fruit-bearing tree, once first planted, and then fruit starts growing on the tree, one is not supposed to eat the fruit of a fruit-bearing tree for the first 3 years that it bears fruit. That those first 3 years, it says in the Torah for trees in the land of Israel, those first 3 years, you're not supposed to eat it because God said so. And only in the 4th year on are we allowed to eat from it. So in the Orthodox, ultra-Orthodox tradition, the letting the hair grow is related to that. And then so it's Lag BaOmer after the 3rd birthday is when their hair is cut. So the tradition, the best place to get your hair cut would be on Meron at Shimon Bar Yochai's tomb, so that you're connecting his yahrzeit and the idea of getting a haircut all together. with that on Lag BaOmer itself. So, the final thing is bonfires. So in Israel, the way to observe Lag BaOmer today is all these youth groups. A big deal in Israel is youth groups. And depending on what kind of Zionist one is in Israel, depends on what kind of youth group they go to. But all the youth groups, from the secular Zionists to the Orthodox Zionists, all do bonfires on Lag BaOmer because it's related to Shimon Bar Yochai also, because, or to the Bar Kokhba revolt, as the way for people to get the message across is to light signal fires on the hilltops. So, for example, when the new month was declared, the way to declare a new month in the time of the temple was the people had to come to the temple in Jerusalem to the Sanhedrin and testify that they saw the new moon. And they would be asked a lot of questions to verify that what they saw was accurate. And then if it was, the testimony was accepted, then they would light a signal fire in Jerusalem that would then lead to other hilltops throughout Israel to light the signal fires as well, to say that it's Rosh Chodesh. And it took a while for the message to get outside of Israel, which is why we have an extra day of Yom Tov added to the calendar to make sure that we're celebrating the holidays at the right time. But signal fires, not just for when Rosh Chodesh would be, but signal fires to alert the community to unite in war, or for whatever other community needs. So the bonfires are a reminder of the revolt against the Romans in Bar Kokhba times. So these are the traditions then that are related to Lag BaOmer today. So the mourning period ends on Lag BaOmer, Thursday night, Friday this year, where a wedding could be celebrated. Depending on which tradition we are, weddings can then be celebrated from Lag BaOmer for the rest of the time. For some, don't do a wedding again until after Shavuot, but Lag BaOmer, also Rosh Chodesh during the Omer period, is a time that you can do a wedding as well. But the mourning related to the 24,000 students of Rabbi Akiva, the games to be played outside related to the war games, related to the Bar Kokhba revolt, and the bonfires, the haircuts related to Shimon Bar Yochai, because Lag BaOmer is his yahrzeit and his burial place is in Meron, Israel. So that's Pesach Sheini, and that's Lag BaOmer today. Any questions or comments? Okay, so that's it for today. So again, next week, no class because I'll be out of town. The following week, we will have class. We'll talk about Shavuot. So May 10th is our next class. And then we're off for a week because of the holiday of Shavuot itself. And then we'll be on again on May 24th. Okay, so I'm sorry about the back and forth schedule. So May 10th and then May 24th are our next two classes. So have a good rest of the day, everybody, and stay safe and healthy. See you all soon. Bruchim to you. Take care.